to the All In Podcast, the show that explores how the top real estate entrepreneurs have gone all in on their businesses. I'm your host, David Morse, with my co-host, Joe Quattrucci, and I invite you to come along with us as we explore the stories of the most elite professionals in the game today to learn how they went all in and how you and I can do the same. So I just have to ask, are you all in? Listeners, so excited to have you back, and today we have Robert Meche as our guest. I'm super excited because Robert has created an amazing business. He is certainly an entrepreneur that's gone all in his life, and we're going to gain so much value from him. So Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Hey, so I know a lot of our listeners know who you are already, but some might not. And so can you just start? Who are you? What is your business?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for about 20 years. Previous to this, I was working with the executive team at Foot Locker, Foot Action USA, and Just for Feet. Come from a very prominent accounting family. My father's the former Assistant Inspector General for Department of Defense and Department of Transportation in the Bush and Clinton administrations. His dad's an accountant. His dad's an accountant. All of us are accountants. And I was the only one that really couldn't stand it. I hated it. Hated accounting more than anything. It was interesting. Just for Feet went through a large bankruptcy, and it gave me time to think about what I could do. I was young back then, very young, and I'd already wanted to do something else. I always tell everybody, I think I had my midlife crisis in my early 30s versus, now. So, but we had been doing some investment in some flip properties, and I liked real estate. So one of the guys was talking to me, and he says, you really ought to get into this. I was like, what? He goes, you got to get into real estate. And I go, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my entire life. Good salaried paid accountant to idiot commission-based fool. I was like, these are opposite ends of the spectrum. But he's like, you'd be really good at it. So I was like, what the hell? So I went ahead and I talked to a lot of people out there. And, now my thing is interesting, and I think we're going to talk about this to some extent, but I could not just jump into real estate full time. Okay. And this will be a bigger part of the conversation in a bit when you ask certain questions, but I just didn't have the means. I just didn't think I could do it. So I was really big on working part-time in the beginning, which is funny because so many people are against doing that. But honestly, that's the only way I got here. I don't think I would have made it, if I hadn't started part-time. So I built my way through, it's always slow your first year or two. And I built my way up, and I was a very good success story in the fact that, every year, the first year is kind of awful, but then the second year is good, third year is good, 4 or 5. So it just gets better, better, better. It's a big snowball effect. And I continued to succeed with it. So I started at the Keller Williams in Flower Mound, Texas. That was a really interesting office. There were a lot of high-powered national agents eventually down the road there. We're all in the same office there. A lot of good friends, a lot of good contacts that I still have today. I spent 5 years there. I became a mega agent, loved real estate, started to get better at it. I got to my 5th year, and I felt that I wanted to do my own thing. And it's funny, today that probably wouldn't happen, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but the independent brokerage was a lot easier back then than it is now due to all the technology and the shift that we've occurred, which is part of the reason why I came back into Keller Williams. I couldn't have done it. But back then, the internet was really kind of like the great equalizer, and it made it easy for me to go off and do my own thing. So I went in, I created a company from the ground up. I called it Small World Realty, which is where the SWR comes from today. Grew it, I think at a tight, we had 75 agents, very profitable, very good mid-size firm. And literally right up until 3 years ago, I didn't need anything from anybody. I didn't need all the offices. I didn't need all the rah. I didn't need the training. None of that. It wasn't something that I felt I needed. And I was very strong about that. But that was all fine right up until 3 years ago, because 3 years ago, we see the entrance of the iBuyers. So Open Door comes in. I know you guys out there in Arizona, y'all have just as much of that as we do, probably in fact more.
Yep.
And when I first heard that, I was like, I never could believe anybody would even follow that particular program. Someone basically saying that we'll buy your house unseen, we'll do it in 15 days, give you cash for it. You don't have to show, super convenient, and you're done. But you're going to lose 20% or 15%, 20%, whatever. I'm like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Nobody will ever do that. Well, 70,000 houses later, I guess I'm the dumbest,
Yeah.
So,
as with many things, the population proves to be maybe a little different than what we expect.
A lot of people have some disposable income, and obviously convenience is at the height of our parameters these days, because that's what it came down to. Because it's just not a good business idea to lose 15, 20% in your largest asset. So that came out, and I was like, that doesn't scare me. That will never overtake real estate. And that's more true today than it was back then. But it scared me a little. I started losing some business, and it was on the back of my head. So Redfin comes in a few years ago. Red signs everywhere, discounted, that's fine. We've always had discount brokers, always have, always will. No offense. However, somebody wants to run their business, that's fine by me, But Redfin was the first time that somebody started having that kind of money and that type of technology and jamming it down my throat. And in this game, half the battle is getting to the people first, and they were doing a much better job of it. Of course, they have billions of dollars too. So started losing some business there. That bothered me. Zillow comes in basically last year. They said they've perfected iBuyer. And not only have they perfected iBuyer, but they're going to go ahead and compete against us as well. I was good at what I did, but I only have so much power to do anything. And it now started to directly affect my business. And this isn't a simple change either. This isn't something that, a few $100,000 will fix, or even $1 million. The guys were so cute when I talked about switching back in. They were like, why don't we just raise 10 million ourselves? I'm like, 10 million? I go, you guys we got another $1 billion to go before we can implement that type of program. So this time around, now it no longer is, I don't need anything from anybody. Now I did need something from somebody, and someone huge like Keller Williams, because I didn't have it. So
can I pause you for just 1 sec, Ron?
Yeah.
So there's several things that I want to pick up on. First off, I loved how you said you were super young, and that you're in your 30s. So for everyone listening who is in your 30s, remember, you're super young. Like you've got time. Especially whenever you're listening to this, if we're in a downshifted market, like you have time to not only survive this, but thrive. So I picked up on that. What I'm also hearing though at the beginning is, you thought real estate was kind of a crazy idea to go from salary to commission.
It was an accident.
So bring us a little bit deeper, just bring us a little deeper into what finally was the linchpin in making that jump.
Yeah. So, if you're raised and you're educated, being a conservative accountant, real estate's the furthest thing from the spectrum. It's different, opposite ends, polar opposites. And I didn't think sales were a really big piece of me. I didn't think, in fact, to this day, I still hate being called a sales guy. I've never felt like I've sold anything to anybody. The bottom line is people need us to help them with housing. That's what I've done for 20 years. So I never liked being called that, but I loved the business part of the deal. I loved the transaction. We had done a few investment properties early on, me and my wife, and we did well with them. I appreciated the business side of it, and I was able to link the two together to enjoy it. And, I had decent people skills. It wasn't like I was, an introvert or anything like that. I don't think anybody ever accused me of that, but I kind of liked what I saw. Friend of mine was working for an independent brokerage, quite honestly, and he suggested that I look at it. He's a longtime friend. He's actually the father of one of my good friends, and he's the one that really kind of sparked me into it. And I started having the conversations, talked to the brokerages out there, and eventually found my way to Keller Williams, which was the most accommodating for someone like me, and that became a very good an awesome part of my life was to be able to be connected that way. So it started off as an accident, started off as I was going to pass time until I find another job, because that, it takes a long time to find jobs at those levels. So I thought it was going to take some time. So I go, I'll just do this as a pass by and this will be fine. I never thought it would be the thing that my eventual career ran into. You mentioned like 30 and stuff. A lot of times there are people are searching when they're 19 or 20 about what they're going to do. I'm like, oh, you got plenty of time. Like, it'll change 5 or 6 times before that's all said and done. So I would have never thought I'd be here, 25 or 20 years later,
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. So, obviously you built a big independent company. You brought us into that change of coming back into KW. Just quickly share with us, like, where's the business at right now?
As far as clarify for me, how are you asking?
Yeah. So how many agents do you still have in your group? How are you running it?
So that's a really good story. And this is live time because we came back 6 or 7 months ago. So we're back. We've been back into the environment. We became one of the largest, if not the largest team in the country when we came back in, which was really a good feat because we had like 150 to 160 as we came in. And we had a lot of people that really weren't doing anything. And we were actually we actually enjoyed the fact that we knew some of them would leave because like they probably shouldn't be here anyways. So we probably lost about, 45 to 50 in the exchange, which was a terrible concern to me. I was just like, God, I knew this was going to happen. But 6 or 7 months later, that's been a huge win because we've already replaced those people, all of them, with people who know the cut system and the cost system and that are all in on our program with Keller Williams. And I mean, that's just like 6 months later, we were one of the top recruiting teams in the country. And those numbers have been just ridiculously favorable. I'll tell you some really quick ones that show automatic wins immediately. For our luxury market, we didn't do very well as a no-name brand, as an independent. We rarely had luxury homes. So in the winter, this past winter, or just a few months ago, we did a $4.5 million home. We had 6 or 7 $1.5 or so million transactions, and possibly secured a $13 million one for the spring coming up. And we never had that at SWR ever. So it's not coincidence. It was the name brand that caused it. Now, the other thing I saw was in our expansion markets, I consider Fort Worth the expansion because it's a little further away from where I'm at in Dallas. And then, of course, San Antonio and Austin. We noticed that my guys in Austin that recruit for me were averaging like maybe 2 to 3 interviews a month. And now they just go to like 15 to 20 a month, just like that, which is really sick because it's really unfair. Because those guys they're saying the same damn thing they said when they were SWR by themselves, but just having the initials behind it, it made all of the difference in the world. So those are just quick. There's a lot of other stuff went behind them. Those are quick ones that have shown us where we're at today and how we grow because it's a very good fit into the Keller Williams organization.
I love that. And I don't want to get too into specific brand or anything like that. But I do know that for agents, it's a big debate, Does a big name brand help or hurt? I mean, you go to the Facebook group, you name whichever one it is, and every day there's a post with hundreds or thousands of comments that are talking about that.
I can answer that in part as far as from whether an independent brokerage versus a national brand. That one I can answer honestly because I've been on both sides. Very few independents have been both sides. See, very few started at a big firm, went to an independent, and then came back into a big firm. Either they went from a big firm to an independent and they stayed there, or they went from an into big. Very few did all 3 of those things. So I can honestly say that there's no doubt. I got all the data in 6 months already. God forbid what that's going to be in 2 or 3 years. I already know what the answer is there. Now, when you start comparing national brand to national brand, that is different thing. Everybody has a reason as to why they're better. But from national to independent, no, there's no doubt. The independent brokerages, it can be very tough for right now. It's very hard for them. And that's how I got here. I realized that I thought that model was broken and I didn't see it being fixed, if ever.
Yeah.
Robert, you mentioned a second ago when you made that transition to Keller Williams, you had some natural attrition, and what happened almost organically was you ended up top grading your talent.
Yeah.
So you basically let go of the bottom third, and then you replace those very quickly with some new and energetic and inspired agents that are ready to work. What is it that you think that's about your team and about the culture within your team that sets you apart from other brokerages? What is it that's attracting talent to you, and why are they becoming so successful?
Yeah, so that's an interesting part for the Keller Williams world. I'm a very different type of team. In fact, I've begged as I've come back in for there to be separations in what they call the teams themselves. The traditional team that Keller Williams is customized to is, you have a rainmaker, you have, maybe some directors of lead gen, directors of ops, and then you've got buyer agents, listing agents, and some of these people are paid and they go through leads and they're trickled down. That's not what I do. My team is made up of truly independent agents. These guys are, and guys and gals, these guys are all doing their own thing. It's just a different support level that we did. So our value proposition, this kind of works into the beginning of the conversation. One of my niches was part-time real estate, obviously. And because I went through it, I realized other people could possibly need that type of environment. So when I started SWR, a lot of it was focused on part-time agents, people who could not be in the office to do the training and all the stuff that, helped them to become better. So what I did was I created a very comprehensive online tutorial system that honestly, outside of showing you how to go to the bathroom, shows you every single thing about real estate. I could take someone right outside and literally it could be a construction worker and I could show them how to work with the buyer probably in 5 or 6 hours. Now they're not going to be perfected at it, but they could do it. That system, it's rare that I get questions off of it. So it wasn't built to replace me or anybody else. The value proposition there was that we built it so someone didn't have to come into the office to learn those things. But what I backed it up with, and this is probably the most special thing about where I added value, was I basically said that I'm going to review every single document before it touches a third party. That actually still is true today with 120, 130 plus. We still go through and review every single document. I do personally. It's a painstaking task that affords me very little sleep, but it's probably also the number one reason I've never been sued in all the years I've been doing this. And I also back that up with 24/7 support. I have managers that work for me, and it's easy for me to pawn off these people on them. I insist on being the primary contact. I am still the one that answers the phone at 11 o'clock at night. So I give instant gratification to anybody that comes in, whether they're a veteran or whether they're new. Those are two different styles that they rely on me on. But those people all have that type of contact, and that's very hard to find in this industry, someone with my level of experience to actually offer their time like that. You have a lot of rainmakers out there that spend a lot of time focusing on the sales. They're calling, they talk about leads, lead generation, ISAs, all these things, which is great. And that's why they do very good business. My calls are focused in on the people that work with me to make sure they always have the coverage they needed. And I'll tell you where I got that from. It was being scared in the beginning of not having that type of help, especially at night. I still don't understand how anybody, including us in general, how we still close those doors at 5 o'clock. 90% of the calls we get are after 5 o'clock. So I wanted to make sure I catered to those people. And that's where SWR became a really good value proposition, because what's happened now is we're running two firms inside of one. SWR is Keller Williams, but now I still run SWR the way I used to do it. I just got all the other toys that Keller Williams has on top of it. So my guys, it doesn't matter whether they want the rah, the full-time or whatever, they've got it. But if they don't want that and they still want Keller Williams to be a part of their life and support and all the systems that we have in place, I got that too. And I'm one of the only ones that can do that.
I love that, because what you did is you identified a gap that existed in the market and you said, how can I expose that? How can I then provide value in that space so that I can build my company? And what that does, I think immediately to the like a blue ocean, red ocean strategy, right? Like the majority of people aren't going after the part-time agents.
Yep.
I talk to rainmakers every day.
I love it, because I'm like, I don't know why.
You're right. Rarely do they say, hey, David, go out and help me find part-time talent. No, they're saying, go find me someone who's going to jump into this full-time right away. And what that does is it provides someone like you the opportunity to swoop in and develop some of the top talent. The reality is they have to be part-time at the outset.
You make an interesting point too. And, Gary has mentioned this several times where, Keller's a different environment than it used to be about dual career agents. And, we're coming into that time frame where we do have a cultural difference inside where some people are like, no, I don't want any part-time agents. And then other ones are like, well, why wouldn't you want that? And that's very divided. There are plenty of market centers that'll be like, no, versus the other ones. And, it's funny. I love these people too. They're the talent level, whatever they believe is fantastic. But I do find it just a little bit of a shot when someone will be like, well, those guys will never make it. I'm like, well, how the hell did I get here then? I mean, how do you explain me? I mean, that's how I got here. And I've got plenty of guys that have used my model and started their own brokerage. I go, don't tell me that. Just because you didn't do it doesn't mean they can. That's probably the bigger thing from an upper level that people should grasp a hold of, is that some of those agents are pretty damn good. Quite honestly, some of them are probably the smarter ones because they know it's going to take a little while for them to get up and going, and they want to make sure they do it right, because the key here is to get them that second and third year. And the problem is we bring so many of them in and we tell them they're going to make all this money, and they get to the 7th month, haven't sold a damn thing. There's nothing in their downline. And so they quit. 83% of them out the door. All those people should have made it to the 2nd or 3rd year. And if they'd had another job and got past only making like $15,000 or $20,000, most of them make 75 to 100 the next 2 or 3 years. And that's what I tried to get them, that bridge so they could go. That's my biggest complaint when someone talks about the part-time. Their first response is always, well, they'll be a legal nightmare. I'm like, not if you watch them, they won't. I go, if you watch everything they do and it goes through you, then they're not a nightmare. And that's the key, is you have to be able to, offer that type of support, which is, why we implemented those systems. We knew those guys couldn't go off on their own. So,
yeah, definitely. So I gotta ask, I think a lot of people know you by your trade name, if you will, the Smoker Broker. Where did that come from?
So it's embarrassing. So it comes from being in a lot of
every good thing is embarrassing.
Well, the embarrassing part is not what the name stands for. It is for being in a lot of competitive barbecue competitions over the years. But the name came from playing cards one day, and someone at one end of the table goes, "Hey, you're that smoker guy." And then another guy goes, "I thought you were a broker." So we just said Smoker Broker, and it stayed like that for the longest time, and it's been adapted. I get a lot of stuff when they hear that name. I've heard, "Are you running a vape store? Are you selling weed or anything?" I get that quite a bit too. So we have to clarify a few times to a lot of people out there.
And we call that ancillary business services.
Yeah, my trademark attorney, when I told her we were looking at trademarking the name for our media and for the radio and stuff, the admin was like, "Hey, I'm really concerned about this guy. I don't think that we should really be trademarking drug activity." And she was like, that is not what he's doing. But it does come from being on, I'm going to call it a semi-professional amateur barbecue team, a group of about 8 to 10 guys. And we've done it for quite some time. And man, we have a good time with it. But that's where the name came from. It's been a good co-brand, I'll tell you that. It's been good for my marketing for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So Robert, from what I understand, you're big into radio in your area. And so I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about how you got introduced to radio, how it's helped your business, and maybe how you would suggest other people that are interested in radio go about getting started.
Yeah, that's a good story. A guy by the name of Mark Warner, he runs KBGI Radio. It's an internet-based radio station, which is interesting because that's where a lot of the talk shows go these days, because most of the AM FM bands are ridiculously expensive. The listening audiences aren't what they used to be, of course, with all the iPod and Apple products out there, and XM satellite, all those types of things. So I went that route. It's a great product because it's not near as expensive as you would think to do it. It's the full radio experience, the intros, the listeners, the FaceTime Live, which is the part that we actually enjoy more. We could actually do a lot of the radio just on podcast alone. But what we do is we do a live radio show that becomes podcast in archive for people to watch. Mm-hmm. So that is really the answer to your second question. Where that's become ridiculously valuable to us is we really focus on a lot of real estate education on that show, not just for agents, new and pre-existing and veteran, but for consumers as well. We actually can tell an agent, hey, if you're struggling with this topic, tell your client to watch this show. So maybe someone else telling them, will get through to their head that, look, that's not the right way you do this. But what we found is it became very consistent. We have a very decent list. We range probably from people who actually watch us more on archive than live. We get anywhere from 700 to 1,500 views in a week. And then there's probably anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 people who listen. But for us, the value comes in the constant education. It's very valuable for recruiting, because when we go out and recruit and we tell them that we're on those things, a lot of our recruits watch the show. And it's really twofold. One, it's educational for them. But two, it gets them to know me a little bit better. And, you can't really know someone inside of a 45-minute interview. It's almost impossible. So it's another layer of the amount of times we're talking to somebody, and it's reinforcing to them, one, that we're out there a lot, and that we do expertise in the material. You can't just be on those shows if you don't have content and you don't know what you're talking about. You have to be able to fill those shows. And it's funny, when they put you on radio, that's one of the first things they go through. The first thing they said, like, yeah, everybody wants to do this, but it's not as easy as you think. The content's very difficult. And content for me was, I can go all day long talking about real estate. So for me, that was a very easy transition. And it's been very productive for us with all those avenues that I just discussed. Really, the radio's been awesome change in the last couple of years to our marketing.
Yeah. I think of audio right now as a really top of the funnel lead gen activity, whether that be lead genning for listings or whatever your business is, a lead gen activity. And would you mind sharing what's the next step to move either that talent that you're trying to acquire or that client into your funnel?
Yeah. So are you talking about from the business side, how we're trying to attract more clients, or how we're trying to bring more agents on and build a bigger model?
Really either or, but is there a second step into the funnel where, the audio, the person that's connected with you through audio isn't just lost off in a nebulous? You obviously track some of the statistics. What's the next, how do you move that person further into your funnel?
Our hope is that when we've gone through our recruiting, that they have our information, the show information is on the card, and they go to watch. They might have already wanted to talk to us from the beginning, but then they more so want to talk to us after they go through the show. And, 90% of them that come to interview have probably watched on the show. They tell us. They say, well, I watched when. Sometimes they do it nonchalantly. They're like, well, I watched the show the other day, and I was interested. I love the way your style is. Some of them go back through the entire archives and watch, which is kind of weird sometimes. But I have some people that do that too. But it really almost forces them to see. Most people will tell you, the agents that go with me, they like the fact that I'm very genuine and upfront. I'm not the typical type of broker. I'm not in your face sales gimmicky, or really what you see is what you get. I'm not a gray area type of guy. It's either right or it's wrong with me. I've lost hundreds and thousands of agents over the years on erring on the side of being cautious. And, I can always make more money, but I can never get my ethics back. So these types of things, when they talk with us and they see that on the show and they see how I am and how I interact, it is very good branding for our real estate business. And those people do eventually funnel back into interviews and most likely become a part of the SWR group.
Love it.
I really appreciate what you just said about you can always make more money, but you can't get your ethics back. I think that's a really important place for people to make their decisions around.
Yeah. And not to be cliche, but, I do use that one quite a bit. In fact, I was at family reunion when I was on stage with Gary. That is a comment that went over very well with a lot of people inside the audience. So, it was very refreshing. I like the fact that people applauded that, because that shows that there's a lot of hope with people that they do believe that's the right way that we should be conducting business. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Robert, you've had an enormous amount of success over the past. You've built a large real estate team, and I'm sure that doesn't come without your fair share of growing pains. Tell us a little bit about some of maybe the stumbles or the lessons learned along the way. Have you failed in any way within your business, and what have you learned from those experiences that maybe other agents and other business owners can learn from you?
Yeah, I don't think you're succeeding if you don't fail at some point. I think everybody will tell you we've made mistakes along the way. It's funny, this conversation, and so absorbed this moment. This is literally live last night, just to show you how far it can go, how we adapt and learn and see the things that we fail. And I probably shouldn't talk about it on here because it's something not as good about me, but that's how open I am. And I actually thought it said a lot about me, how I reacted to it. I've tried so hard to implement 24/7 support, be there for the agents. And that's my claim, is that you won't get any better support anywhere. I mean, I will not go an hour or two without answering my phone, ever. So I've prided myself on that all these years. Well, I had an agent that just yesterday said that they wanted to move to another team. And I don't get that very often. So I was like, I don't understand. What is the problem? And she goes, you're going to think this is really silly. She goes, because it kind of embarrasses me. But I was looking for someone to tell me, hey, how did things go today? How was your Ignite classes? How are you doing? And, I froze in my tracks, and I'm like, I don't remember the last time I asked those types of questions. I don't remember the last time I took the time. And in defense of me, I did it because I always felt they always had the support. I'm like, well, that should never be a problem. But I failed to see that some of those people, I'm like, that actually means something to them. And this is last night. 15 years of running this firm, and that no one ever mentioned that to me. That bothered me a little bit because it made me think, I'm like, God, how many others did I lose before by not being like that? So, there's little failures like that over time. When you adapt new policies, those are always concerning. How do the agents react to them? The financial is always a difficult decision when you're running a brokerage or a massive team. It's very hard. The financing, no matter what you do to it or how you tweak it, especially if it's changed, there's always a response to it. Some it's okay. It's never awesome, but sometimes it's more negative than others. So I think those are the toughest points. Dealing with people is very difficult. I think you talk about growing pains. One of the things I feel I was very fortunate is I had a job before that I saw all these things. Management has been, I've been doing that honestly since I'm 17 years old as far as managing people goes. And I think it's hard sometimes for a team lead to get pushed up and they've never had any type of business experience. They've just been good salespeople and they go up through the system. Those people don't know what's about to hit them. Those team leads and those brokerages and managers, it's not anything about sales. What it's honestly about is how to run that, because they start getting introduced to HR issues, to legal issues, and that's the part that blindsides you. Because if you can't do that, good luck running those things. Those TLs, they see that all day long. HR, God knows how many times you have to address somebody on an HR issue. Social media alone, God, it's like almost 10 hours a week telling somebody, hey, you can't have the American flag burning in your background when you have my logo on the other side of it. You could do it personally if you wanted to, but not when you put KW on it. It's just amazing how many times you have to talk to people. For me, that was secondhand. I knew how to do all that stuff, but that's tough. When you have to deal with people constantly, that's where a lot of your growing pains are, is making sure someone's adjusted, especially if it's a veteran agent that's never gone through that. They're like almost shocked when you're talking to them a certain way. I'm like, yeah, because I've seen it a few times. I know what you're about to do. And they're like in disbelief that I'm telling them that. I'm like, you just keep up what you're doing. You watch what happens with it. So I think that's a hard part too, getting it across to the management of the brokerage. It's not the easiest thing. It's not for the faint of heart.
What you're getting at, Robert, is so important. And for those listening, I don't care whether you're new or been in this business for 30 years. I tell agents all the time that the switch from being a solo agent to that time when you make your first hire, in the same vein that Stephen Covey says, we need to begin with the end in mind. Like, you've got to be thinking from day one. There's a shift that takes place. There's an inflection point where you go from being a salesperson primarily to a leader.
Yeah, that learning curve will smack you too. I mean, that learning curve is huge if you've never seen it before.
Enormous. And at no fault to a particular real estate entrepreneur, a lot of us back our way into this. We don't have that experience. And so it makes it that much more important to have people like you and to keep it at the forefront of our minds, that shift, that pivot has to take place. If you're going to go all in this real estate thing and grow a really big business, which we all desire to do, whatever that looks like, you've got to be ready to make that leadership jump.
You mentioned a comment too a little while ago that's important. It doesn't matter where you're at either, whether you're younger, older. It's a matter of, have you ever encountered that stuff before in your life? Because if you're like 48 years old and you've never had that type of experience, and now all of a sudden you're getting into it, it's going to be the same reaction to the person who was 28 that's seeing it for the first time, because it's the amount of experience and skill you've had in dealing with those issues, dealing with people on negative responses about things about, when you start talking about, even hygiene, those are the most embarrassing when you have to address them because a client's complaining or someone makes just a ridiculous comment that they thought wasn't harmful, but in fact violated the Fair Housing Act. Those types of things make it very difficult. I'm surprised my hair has stayed relatively dark. Someone accused me the other day of dyeing my hair. I'm like, look at my beard. I didn't dye a damn thing. I'm just lucky it hasn't gone up here yet. It's tough. There's things you see and you hear, you're just like, how did they get to this point? So yeah, that's a tough learning curve for a lot of people.
So I've got to ask, what's your big vision? What's next?
Yeah. So to me, you can have massive, growth and things that you want to do. Kristen Cole, it's amazing. God, she's so, it's so overwhelming to watch her. She's so strong at what she does and how she can just touch everywhere and it almost be seamless for her. And I don't think I could ever be at that level, or I guess I could. I don't know if I'd want to. You have to be really geared towards doing that. But for me, my bigger plans are just be able to hit that big X in the state of Texas, all the way down the 35 corridor in all major cities. I still don't have a presence in Houston, which is massive. I still don't have a presence on the Gulf Coast and up into the Panhandle. Those are things for me. If I'm being realistic with what I can accomplish and what I can do, that's probably where I set my goals to be, is to really do well in Texas and to help Keller Williams nationwide, no matter what they ask or want from me. Those would probably be my bigger goals.
I love it. So just as we wrap up here, a couple questions for you that we ask every interview. Who's the biggest business influence on your life?
You always answer your father, because it just seems like you get so much information. But my dad is really a different case. His business background, in the political arenas he's been in, I got to watch how he had to interact with all levels of people, from, just the average person to, literally, the vice president, a secretary, it's amazing watching those interactions. And as you get older, it's not like you're sitting there next to your dad, but you hear the same conversations, when they're in the other room or they're talking about something. And those had very strong effects on me. My attitude probably comes from my mother, and my business sense probably comes from my father. I'll tell you another big influence to me, and it's not a name. It was a job. So I've been trained. I've had a lot of people spend money on me to make sure I'm trained at a very high level of customer service. And I will tell you, every job I've ever had, and even running my own company, the best experience I've ever had to this day was working at Kroger. I spent 10 years there when I was like 15 till I was 25, working my way all the way up to a manager. And I'm going to tell you, running that customer service desk is still some of the best training and influence I've ever had, because that's where I learned to talk to everyone, the rich, the poor, the bad, the good, the mean, the scary, everyone. And I learned to adapt to their situations. That actually has been a huge influence. That's a weird way to answer that question, but for me, it's very meaningful, because that honestly is a lot of what I am today in dealing with thousands of people crossing, as a kid, as a job that really you wouldn't have thought amounted to anything, but that was a really big influence on me as well.
So going right along with knowledge and experience and how you got your business to this point, tell us about a book that you've read that has had an impact on your career, or maybe about a book that you would recommend somebody read that's aiming to get where you've been.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I'm weak I'm not as big as everybody else with the reading. A lot of people have all these decks of books, and I always feel embarrassed when I'm in the masterminds, the higher ones. I'm like, God, I must need to get out more or something. But I still like the business book, Who Moved My Cheese? I still think that's one of the traditional ones out there. I still think it's absorbing to me. And I guess I am a good example of it because I exemplified it last year. No matter how good you do or how well you're doing, you are subject to change. And if you don't adapt and you don't move, you will be left behind. I made a significant change in the last year to take a very profitable group that was my own and put it back into Keller Williams. But, I saw what the road ahead had. I didn't like it. I wasn't proud to where, a lot of independent brokers make the mistake of being very prideful of their team and their group. And they sacrifice hurting the group to move it somewhere because of their pride. And that's something that if you're really a good manager, a good leader, a good executive, you change when you have to, no matter what you have to do. And I took all the elements into play. I looked at everything that was happening. And to me, I made the most logical choice, which I can easily defend today was the best thing I could have done. So to me, to be able to change and adapt, that book talks a lot about switching everything we're talking about today and all these daily calls, all these Zoom calls, everything. That book really amplifies that. That's a long time ago. I saw it introduced the other day. I'm like, oh, that one was years ago. I actually read that one. So
I love the YouTube video that goes along with that. It's something that I show a lot in different classes. And so really, for our listeners, that's huge. To go all in requires you to change.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
I read just this morning. I think what's his name? I'm going to butcher it. E. Deming or something like that. An American engineer, right? Yeah. He says change is optional because not everyone chooses to survive.
Right. It's true.
So a lot of times we hear change isn't optional, right? But the flip side of that, no, it is. If you want to survive and then eventually thrive, like you've got to change. And
I think it's the number one thing that should be taught in the schools, especially the advanced schools, business, college, or whatever, that they really should be focusing in on. Change is the number one thing you have to be capable of. This stuff about being prideful and you've always done it that way, that's like the most cement to death in business I've ever heard. And I'm probably through my 5th life change already in business. And I still think 2 or 3 more are upcoming that are focused in real estate, but I still think there's more.
Yeah. So ideas can be theoretical, right? And we're all about taking action. Yeah. What is the one thing a real estate entrepreneur, whether new, seasoned, whatever, if they want to push the chips all in their life and business, like what is the immediate action step that they can take today?
So I'm big on, and I hope this answer is appreciated because I think it's different than most people. There's a lot of answers that are general there. I am huge on niche marketing. I don't like being the same person as the guy next to me, because if it's the same person next to me, I'm like, I'm doing the same thing they are. It means I'm going to replicate what they're doing. And I want to be different. I don't want to run the same thing. Pick a niche. My niche was part-time real estate in the beginning, which eventually evolved into all-time, full service, part-time, which was a benefit of that. But I always tell people, focus on something that you see a lot of people who want to focus on veteran real estate. That's great, fine. But if you're going to do it different than the other person out there. You have to have something that separates you. I talk to this about the networking all the time. When people go to a chamber of commerce, there's 30 other agents there. And a lot of agents are like, well, I'm not going to go. That's just wasteful time. I go, yeah, if you're just like how the rest of them, if you're different, that might even be a better opportunity because you might stand out more. So I'm big on niche marketing. To me, niche marketing is a really big, if I'm going all in on something, I get all the support, all the information, the finance stuff that I need, and I put that into one strain focus. This all goes into your business plans. Those things have to be available. So someone takes you serious. They're like, I like that idea. I think I'm going to go with it.
Yeah. So people who go all in, what I'm hearing you say there are people who choose to go deep on one thing.
Yeah. Something they can believe in, something that they know. And it's not short-term thoughts. Like, it's funny. My name, Small World Realty, I always tell anybody who ever talks about starting an indie brokerage, which I don't do as much anymore because I don't encourage it. But, you would think your real estate name is really easy to do. Do you know that the name Small World Realty was the 37th name I picked? And every time I picked one, I'm like, oh, that's original. Well, you want to humble yourself? Just go think you have an original idea and see how many 40, 50, and 100 people use your name. You have to think long term. For instance, in Texas, you have a lot of people that do Lone Star Realty. Well, Lone Star's Realty is tough if you move to Mississippi or to Massachusetts. You have to really think these things through. So when you talk about all in and going deep into it, that's a really good comment because it's not on the surface. You have to really go through the brokerage that I started. That was probably a 2-year process. That was a 2-year thought process on putting the things together and saying, this is what it should be.
Awesome. Hey, Robert, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know Joe and I are so appreciative.
Absolutely.
Tell our listeners, where can they learn more about you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, it's not hard. I'm on Thursdays noon to 1 on KBGI Radio. So that's KBGI radio.com. That's out of Frisco, Texas. Honestly, no bias to the show at all. It makes no difference to me whether someone listens. I don't care about the amount of people that watch. That show is a very good resource, especially for new agents. I talk about the stuff that you will not get out of the books. I'm talking about the things that when you're by yourself at 9 o'clock at night and you've got nowhere else to go and nobody will help you, those are the types of things I teach. I think it's good for veteran agents that they go back and reassess. Oh, I didn't know that's how that worked. It's surprising how many things you don't know when you listen to somebody else do it. And it's great for the general public too. So that's always a good way. You can always find me at smallworldrealty.com too. And like I said, I have a lot of presence in the Dallas-Fort Worth area with the KW Frisco Stars market, and of course in Austin and San Antonio as well.
Awesome. Robert, thank you so much. We will link all that up in the show notes. I look forward to spending more time with you in the future. I know we'll see you at events, and I'm sure that we'll work together in the future. So
I really enjoyed it, guys. Thanks for having me.
And have an awesome day.
Thanks, Robert.
Take care, all right?
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play all in.